Here is the recap of the first 5 seasons of The Handmaid's Tale. The action of the series takes place in the near future, where the world is in crisis and people have almost stopped giving offspring. Somewhere in the United States, June Osborne, the main character, and her friend Moira get acquainted on the street with Luke. And later June and Luke get married and they have a daughter. A few years later, a religious extremist group, the Sons of Jacob, overthrows the United States government and creates a totalitarian theocratic state of Gilead. From now on, all women must fulfill their natural duty, and for this they create the following rules. Women are divided into groups. Wives are the actual wives of the commanders, the high-ranking men in Gilead. The Marthas are the servants in the houses, and handmaids are girls who can theoretically still get pregnant. They're sent to the houses of the commanders, where they have to have sex with them every month for the continuation of the human race. Of course, people didn't like that very much, but the protests were quickly quelled. The main characters realize it's time to get out of the country, but they don't make it. June and her daughter are caught, but Luke is shot, and the woman thinks he's dead. However, by the end of the season, we learn that he is found by the resistance and helps to get out of the country to Canada. June's daughter is taken away from her, and she is sent to the Red Center where women are trained to be handmaids. There she meets her friend Moira, and they try to escape. Moira succeeds, but June is caught and brutally punished. However, as we learn later, Moira is also captured. For 2 years, June lived in the commander's house, but because she failed to get pregnant, she was transferred to a new family with Fred Waterford and is now called Offred, which means as if she belongs to Fred. She meets another handmaid, Ofglin, who tells June about a resistance called Mayday. Soon, Ofglin is found out to be a lesbian and is forcibly performed on her to have her female genitalia removed. A short time later, Ofglin gets into a car and kills one of the guards, for which she is taken somewhere. Fred Waterford invites June to his office, where women are forbidden by law, and to June's surprise, they just play Scrabble. She even takes a liking to her master. After a while, Offred still doesn't get pregnant, and the commander's wife, Serena, suspects that Fred is the problem, not the handmaid. She suggests that June have sex with Nick, their driver, to increase the woman's chances. June agrees, though she suspects that Nick may actually be an eye, which is the name given to people who spy on certain persons and report abnormal behavior. As we find out later, he is actually the eye. And June gets pregnant. A delegation from other countries arrives in Gilead to renew diplomatic and trade relations with this closed nation. Offred learns that the commodity in these trade relations will be handmaids, as no children have been born in the world except in Gilead for a long time. June secretly asks for help from the diplomats, but they can do nothing. However, one of the guests informs the woman that her husband is alive and in Canada. One evening, the commander takes June to an underground brothel for high-ranking officials, where she meets Moira, who works there as a prostitute. June encourages her, she makes another escape, which this time is successful, and Moira makes it to Canada, where she is met by Luke. Serena learns of Offred and her husband's secret relationship. In retaliation, she takes June to the house where her daughter Hannah lives, but won't let her go out to see her. Serena tells June that as long as she behaves well, nothing will happen to her daughter. One of the handmaids named Janine had a cuckoo after her baby was taken away from her. She steals the baby and tries to jump off a bridge with him, but June, being her friend, persuades her not to do it. However, all the handmaids in the town are forced to stone Janine, but June and all the others refuse to do it. Offred realizes that it won't be left that easily, and eventually they come for her. But just before they leave, Nick tells June not to worry and to trust him. This is the end of the first season. The main character June is thrown into a car and taken to a strange place for refusing to stone one of the handmaids. As it turns out, the authorities have gathered all those rebellious handmaids and decided to punish them. But since they are the most valuable resource of Gilead, they were simply intimidated and released back. The government learns that June is pregnant and she becomes untouchable. At the checkup, the doctor gives June a key and hints that she can escape, which she does. Arriving at an abandoned warehouse, she is met by Nick, who tells her that she will have to wait a while before she can escape the country. A few months pass and it's time to escape. But something goes wrong and June has to make her own way to the airstrip, where she is met by a pilot who helps people get out of the country. Suddenly, the guards show up and take June back. Though everyone realizes that she was trying to escape, the government announces that Offred was kidnapped and has now been heroically brought home. Of course, Serena is not happy that June will be in their home until the birth. But Fred decides to keep her, as he has feelings for her. Offred hides the fact that her pregnancy is going through complications, and one evening she faints and falls out of a window. In the end, the woman and child are saved, and Fred gives June a photograph of her daughter Hannah. At the ceremony, Nick is given a wife for his good service, but he ignores her, being in love with June. After a while, she escapes with another guard, and eventually the fugitives are executed. A delegation from other countries arrives at the newly built Red Center. I remind you, the Red Center is where the handmaids are educated. Fred speaks at the podium, but suddenly one of the handmaids blows herself up, killing many people, including the handmaids, and injuring Fred. We are told the fate of Emily, who killed a guard in the first season. She is sent to work in a penal colony where Gilead sends women who have done bad things. They also show her past, where she and her wife and child try to fly out of the country when Gilead didn't exist yet. However, Emily is not allowed out of the country and is separated from her family. Soon, crazy Janine, who was not stoned to death, is brought to the colony. And after a while, cars arrive and pick up Emily, Janine, and a few other women, as there is a shortage of handmaids in the country after the terrorist attack. Meanwhile, in Canada, the main character's husband, Luke, lives with Moira, and they try to find out what happened in Gilead and if June is okay. We are also shown June's past, the birth of her daughter, her relationship with her mother, and so on. While Fred is in the hospital, Serena decides to help her husband draft some orders. She makes her own edits to them and asks June to help with proofreading the text, since she used to work as an editor. However, when Fred recovers, he punishes his wife for such initiative. Officer Putnam's baby falls ill. It's the same baby that Janine had, and the best doctors can't do anything. June convinces them to let the baby meet its mother, and miraculously, the baby gets better. Fred, Serena, and Nick are traveling on a diplomatic mission to Canada. As Fred gets out of the car, Luke bursts out of the crowd and insults him, telling him that he is the husband of his handmaid. Nick later finds him and informs him that June is fine, as well as passing along letters from the other handmaids, which Luke later leaks onto the internet. Meanwhile, some Canadian government agent offers Serena a chance to start a new life away from Gilead and help her escape right away. However, she refuses, though she begins to have doubts. When they return home, Serena suggests her husband induce June's labor, and Fred rapes June. June asks Fred to meet her daughter Hannah, and he agrees. He secretly sends her and Nick to some abandoned estate, where June is finally reunited with her baby. Even little Hannah doesn't realize how bad things are in Gilead, and blames her mother for keeping them apart. Time is running out, and the girl is taken away. But suddenly guards appear. June hides in the house, and Nick is arrested. Left alone in the middle of nowhere, she once again tries to escape, but suddenly contractions start, and she gives birth to the baby alone. After a while, she is found, and the girl is taken away. June is sent to a Red Center where her milk is pumped out to feed the baby. But because the baby is not with her mother, June's milk stops flowing and she returns to the Waterford home. Nick gets released too, by the way. In Gilead, women are forbidden to read, and Serena begins to question this law as she fears that her daughter will have to live in such a world. She gathers the other officers' wives and demands that the men allow the female children to read at least the Bible, the law by which they will have to live. And then Serena begins to read it. Fred has to punish his wife and has her finger cut off. Emily is transferred to a new family with Commander Lawrence, who behaves very eccentrically and seems to be a good person, even though he is responsible for what Gilead has become. After a while, Emily, in a fit of rage, stabs Aunt Lydia in the back and throws her down the stairs, and Lawrence puts Emily in the car, and they drive off in an unknown direction. Meanwhile, Martha informs June to take her baby, get dressed, and get ready to run away. Serena sees that June is about to run away, but lets her go. The Marfas from different houses quietly guide June around town, and she eventually makes it to the meeting place where Lawrence also brings Emily. However, June decides to stay and save her older daughter Hannah. She gives the baby to Emily, and they leave. This is the end of the second season. Immediately after the events of the previous season, June asks Commander Lawrence to take her to her eldest daughter Hannah, who is staying with Commander Mackenzie's family. June fails to kidnap her daughter, and she is brought back home. Because Serena was also involved in the kidnapping of the girl in the previous season, Fred sets things up so that only Emily is accused of the kidnapping, and June gets away with it. Meanwhile, Emily and her baby cross the border into Canada, where they are found, granted shelter, and soon she meets Luke and Moira, where she gives them Nicole to raise. In Gilead, Serena goes cuckoo, burns down the house and tries to kill herself, but June saves her. And the main character herself is transferred to a new commander, the very same Lawrence. After a while, June is given a new pair to walk with, a handmaid named Matthew, who does not share the main character's views on the world around her, and is pregnant with her fourth child. June learns that the Marfas have created some sort of resistance cell, and even helps them rescue a few women who were trying to escape from the country, which earns her respect among the Marfas. We also learn that Aunt Lydia survived after Emily threw her down the stairs. Lawrence notices that June is becoming disobedient and decides to teach her a lesson. He takes her to a place where women are kept in cages and tells June that he was able to get only 5 places for Marfas from the government. She will have to choose them, and the rest will be sent to the colonies, which is tantamount to death. June refuses at first, but eventually chooses the women who can eventually help the resistance. June also meets Nick. He has been promoted to the rank of commander and is about to be sent to the war Gilead is waging with the rest of the world. Serena is still distraught and not speaking to Fred, but her mother Pamela, and after a while, June convinced Serena to reunite with her husband. In Canada, meanwhile, Emily reunites with his wife and son, from whom they were separated when Gilead was first formed. Gilead learns that the Waterford's baby is in the hands of the main character's husband and decides to get it back. To begin, Serena asks June for a favor. The main character under supervision calls her husband and asks him to arrange a meeting at the Canadian airport Serena with Nicole. Everything goes well, but there, she also meets a special agent named Mark, who again offers her to stay in Canada and start a new life. She refuses, but Mark leaves Serena a satellite phone so that she can contact him at any time. Serena also gives Luke an audio tape with June's voice on it, where she tells him that Nicole was conceived out of love when she slept with Nick and suggests that Luke forget her in order to move on with his life. The Waterfords continue to try to get their child back and begin to pressure Canada. They record an appeal, saying that the child has actually been kidnapped, and even the handmaid wants him back. Soon, the Waterfords and June meet with a delegation from Switzerland, who are acting as a neutral party in the negotiations between Gilead and Canada. June arranges with the diplomats that she will bring Nick to them to share valuable information with them, and they will make sure that Nicole is never taken back to that country. However, the Swiss refuse to help, as Nick's past is too controversial, and they fear that he is a spy. After that, Nick goes to the front, and Fred makes a reputation for himself, and he and Serena even move to the capital, where they are taken under the wing of the influential Commander Winslow, who already has 6 children with his handmaids. The Marfa's family of Hannah, the daughter of the main character, decide to help June steal the child. However, Matthew notices that they are planning something and informs Aunt Lydia about it, for which all those involved except June are sentenced to death, and Hannah's family moves to an unknown place. June decides to take revenge on Matthew and tells Aunt Lydia that she was thinking of getting rid of the child. She is punished for this, and is also despised by the other handmaids for snitching on June. Soon Matthew starts to go cuckoo and tries to kill Aunt Lydia, but the guards manage to stop her, because of which the woman ends up in hospital and becomes a vegetable connected to the life support system. Aunt Lydia, knowing that June is to blame for all this, makes her sit on her knees in front of Matthew until she gives birth. After a month of loneliness, June starts to go crazy and even wants to kill the pregnant woman. But in the end, she dies herself, and the baby is saved. June decides to take as many children out of Gilead as possible. She persuades the resistance of Marphas and Lawrence to help her. At first, the plan was for Lawrence and his wife to leave the country, and so that he would not be executed, he would kidnap 52 children with him as a sign of goodwill. However, Lawrence's wife is mentally unwell, and when the commander has to have sex with June, she can't stand it and kills herself. After that, the plan has to be adjusted. Meanwhile, Serena realizes that Fred is in no hurry to get Nicole back, and has started all this to climb the career ladder. Fred is remorseful because he loves his wife, and then Serena suggests that her husband call Mark on the same satellite phone so that they can secretly share secret information about Gilead, and Canada will return the baby to them. Eventually, Serena sets her husband up, they cross the border, and Fred is arrested. The woman's plan apparently was to turn in her husband, and she would be made a Canadian citizen, where she could just see Nicole occasionally, since she supposedly didn't commit any crime, but was a victim in Gilead. However, out of anger, Fred tells Mark that Serena is not without sin, and it was she who ordered Nick to have sex with June, for which Serena is also put in jail. June learns from Marphas's resistance that a certain bartender at the brothel is smuggling contraband by plane and decides to get the children out of the country that way. June asks Lawrence to take her to the brothel, where she makes an arrangement with the bartender. But as June is leaving, she is stopped by Commander Winslow and wants to rape her. June kills him, and the brothel's Marphas burns the corpse, destroys the evidence, and helps her get out unnoticed. The day of the escape arrives, and the Marphas bring many more than 52 children to Lawrence's house. Lawrence stays home. The children are put on a plane and make it safely to Canada. And June is injured when she tries to distract the guard, but the other handmaids find her in the woods, load her onto a makeshift stretcher, and carry her back to town. This is the end of the 3rd season. The handmaids rescue the wounded June, and together they make their way to Mayday's hideout, where they spend some time while the main character's wounds heal. This farm is run by Esther Keyes, who is assisted by loyal guards who are of non-traditional sexual orientation, which is punishable by death in Gilead. Esther has been given to a commander since she was a child and forced to have sex with both him and other commanders. Of course, this broke the girl and she became bitter at all Gilead. That's why she helps the handmaids, and also she quietly poisons her commander so that he could not think, and the farm management fell to her. Commander Lawrence is arrested for his involvement in the kidnapping of 86 children in the previous season, but because he is so important to the functioning of Gilead, he is not executed, although he is removed from direct command and used as an advisor. In Canada, Fred and Serena are being prepared for trial, and at a medical exam it is discovered that Serena is pregnant. She meets Rita, their Marpha, who escaped with the children on an airplane, and asks her to testify that she is actually not a bad person, but Rita refuses. Also, ex-Marpha tells Fred about his wife's pregnancy, but Serena doesn't want to communicate with her husband. The main character goes to a brothel for commodores, where she learns from the resistance the next address of the shelter, where she and the handmaids can go. June passes this information on to her friends, but she can't leave the women in the brothel for nothing and goes back. She gives them poison to kill all the commanders, which they gladly do. Back at the farm, she falls into a trap, but it turns out that the other handmaids have escaped. Nick is sent to catch her, and he tells June that her only chance to escape is to tell where the other handmaids have escaped to. June refuses and is taken to a special prison where she is tortured. The main character holds out for a long time, but as soon as they bring her to the cell where her daughter Hannah is sitting and threaten to torture her, June tells the villains where the handmaids are. We are also shown that when Hannah saw her birth mother, she did not recognize her and was very frightened, which hurt June very much. It is revealed that some of the children who were taken from Gilead are not mentally prepared for their new life and a new family, as they are already used to the Gilead families. We are also shown that Moira begins a relationship with a woman named Una, who works with her at a refugee support center. The escaped handmaids are caught and taken to a special breeding camp where the women are supposed to be kept like animals and mated with men to get pregnant. Nick arranges everything so that the handmaids manage to escape, but the guards start shooting at the women and only Janine and June survive. They climb into a milk tanker that is headed for Chicago, and after some time they reach the city. A resistance cell finds them there and gives them shelter and food in exchange for one of them having to sleep with the leader of the cell. June can't overpower herself, but Janine agrees without any problems, and the main characters live in the resistance camp for some time. Because Aunt Lydia failed to keep the handmaids safe, she is removed from her position and replaced by a younger Aunt Ruth. Lydia goes to Commander Lawrence and demands that he give her job back, or she will tell all his terrible secrets. The old man realizes that he can actually use Lydia for his own purposes, as she knows the secrets of other high-ranking officers of Gilead as well. Lawrence regains his seat on the board and also reinstates Lydia to her former position. Nick learns from Mayday that June is alive and in Chicago, and since there is currently warfare going on there, Nick realizes that he needs to somehow stop the bombing of the city and allow June to leave the country. He asks Lawrence to let humanitarian aid from Canada into Chicago. The old man agrees, but for some reason he orders to bomb the resistance camps first. Meanwhile, in Chicago, June and her friend realize that the resistance cell they are in is just trying to survive and not fighting. June decides to find a more active military group and heads downtown, with Janin following her. They soon find a resistance military base, but that's when Gilead's bombs rain down on the city. A concussed June regains consciousness, but doesn't find Janin anywhere. Humanitarian aid shows up, and the main character sees Moira, who goes with her to the medical camp. Unfortunately, Gilead orders the Canadians to leave Chicago, but Moira takes June with her to the ship. As the ship sails away from the shore, Moira tells the crew that she has taken her friend with her, which the others don't like very much, as it could get them all killed in an inspection. However, Una, Moira's girlfriend, allows June to stay, and together they make it to Canada. Una and Moira fight over letting June get on the ship, but they eventually reconcile. June asks for refuge in Canada, and they gladly give her the opportunity, as everyone knows that she helped to get the children out of Gilead. Here she is a hero and has some influence. Luke finally meets his wife, but she still cannot recover from everything that happened to her, and the man has to wait obediently. June decides to put Fred and his wife behind bars with all her might and testifies in court at the preliminary hearing, telling about all the torment she had to endure because of them. Although Serena is still angry with her husband, she realizes that without his support, she will not be able to justify herself in court, and makes peace with Fred. The Waterfords tell the press that Serena is pregnant thanks to God's intervention, and that Gilead is doing the right thing, which makes them fans in Canada. The women who escaped from Gilead organize a support group and discuss their problems in it. June insists that the women continue to fight Gilead, but not everyone supports her in this, as not everyone is as nuts as the main character. Emily is contacted by a former aunt from Gilead, who has also fled the country, and begs her to forgive her for denouncing Emily in the past, which led to her having female genital mutilation surgery in Season 1. Emily doesn't want to forgive her, so the former aunt kills herself. Aunt Lydia, after talking to June when she was tortured earlier in the season, begins to question whether Gilead is doing right by the handmaids. When Janine is returned to her, who turns out to be alive, she does not send her to the breeding camp and takes her into her care. Esther is also brought to the Red Center, having been turned into a handmaid for harboring women. At first, the girl refuses to eat, and Aunt Lydia sends Janine to her. She tells Esther what will happen to her if she continues to resist, and eventually the girl gives in. June finally opens up to Luke and tells him everything that happened in Gilead. as well as the moment when she was brought to Hannah and intimidated into harming her daughter. June apologizes to her husband for not being able to take Hannah with her. Luke doesn't blame his wife, of course, but informs her that she didn't take every opportunity to free her daughter. They first call Lawrence on a closed line and ask him to help them get Hannah, but he tells June that he will only do so in exchange for the 10 children she took out of Gilead. She, of course, refuses, and then Luke tells his wife that he knows another way to get their daughter. June and her second daughter, named Nicole, go to meet Nick, who is the girl's father. Unfortunately, he also has no way to get to Hannah, but he gives June all the information he can find about her whereabouts. We also learn that Nick has a wife by this time. A delegation from Gilead arrives in Canada to meet with the Waterfords. Serena is told that when she is eventually imprisoned, Gilead will have no problem taking her daughter into care. And Fred is made to understand that his homeland has no intention of helping him leave Canada. The couple realize their situation, and Fred, in exchange for freedom for his family and political immunity, begins to leak information about Gilead to the Canadians. Mark informs June that the Waterfords are about to be released, but she intends to get back at Fred in any way she can, and comes up with the following plan. June and Mark travel to neutral territory to meet with Lawrence. The commander offers to take from them Fred Waterford in exchange for the 22 women from the resistance who are currently in Gilead prison, as the country fears that he may reveal too much information. The Canadians agree and exchange the man for the women. After crossing the border, Fred is met by Nick, who takes the traitor into the woods. There, June and the other women who escaped from Gilead are waiting for him, and they brutally kill Fred. Back home, covered in blood, June hugs her daughter Nicole and tells Luke that she will be leaving soon. This is the end of the 4th season. June returns home, and her loved ones are shocked at what she has done. When the main character comes to her senses, she decides to turn herself in to the authorities and goes to the police. However, there she is informed that no one will prosecute her for Fred's murder, as the crime was not committed in Canada. Meanwhile, Serena learns of her husband's death and soon realizes that June did it. As she leaves the morgue, she sees that some Canadian citizens don't just sympathize with her, they believe Gilead's policy is the right one. Serena demands that she be given the opportunity to bury her husband in his homeland, and is allowed to do so. Along with her goes Special Agent Mark, and let me tell you now more about geopolitics in this universe, since it was only in Season 5 that we learned something about it. Gilead is a separate state formed in the United States of America. But America itself hasn't really gone anywhere, even though it has almost no territory of its own. Part of the government and military are based in Canada and oppose Gilead in every possible way. Between these countries, there is a so-called no man's land, where there are constant military conflicts. Mark is a United States special agent and is engaged in various governmental activities, including intelligence. Serena arrives in Gilead, where she learns that a very modest funeral is going to be held for her late husband. The woman pressures Commander Lawrence, who is currently not the least in the government of the country. After that, the nation organizes a fancy funeral for Fred with television coverage, and Gilead makes sure that it is shown on all TV channels of different countries. At that moment, June and Luke see the funeral procession on the big screens and notice their grown-up daughter Hannah. She is wearing plum-colored clothes, and I will remind you that for all people in Gilead, the color of clothes means belonging to a certain class. June tries to find out what plum means, since there was no such color before. And soon she is informed that when the daughters of officers reach the age of 12, they are given to the wives' school. So Hannah is soon to be married off to some commander. Pregnant Serena wants to stay in Gilead and help her homeland, as she believes that she can induce other countries to cooperate with her image. However, the commanders do not want to keep her in their country, as she will set a bad example for the citizens. Therefore, they decide to send her back to Canada, where she will serve as a diplomat. Soon, the United States government drops all charges against Serena, and she opens the Gilead Cultural Center in Toronto. And soon she wants to turn it into a fertility center so that people from all over the world can learn how Gilead managed to defeat infertility. June also lives in the same city. Having learned about it, the main character and her husband intend to expel Serena from the country. Luke wants to do it by legal means, but June thinks that the woman should be killed. She arms herself with a gun and goes to the cultural center. One of the protesters hits Moira and June shoots in the air. Security decides to evacuate Serena and takes her out through the emergency exit, where she meets the main character. However, June hesitates to kill her nemesis as she sees that she is pregnant. Soon, the Gilead Cultural Center is shut down, as Luke manages to pull some strings and many violations are found in the building of the center. Serena is taken to the estate of Ryan Wheeler. The man is a powerful Canadian citizen who supports Gilead. His wife Alanis wants Serena's child for herself, so the woman is kept in the house as a handmaid in Gilead, not allowed to leave the house, make her own decisions and so on, and all this with the permission of the commanders of Gilead. Meanwhile, June and Luke learn from Mayday that their man on the border has information about Hannah's whereabouts. However, due to tensions in no man's land, no one can go to the location. Therefore, June and Luke decide to go on their own. They end up meeting a guard and getting a flash drive with the data. But on the way back, they are spotted by a patrol. The couple is caught and sent to a cage. Soon, they are separated. Luke is taken back to Canada, and June is put on a bus and sent to Gilead. We learn that it was Wheeler's men to whom June Osborne's capture is reported. Serena learns of this and asks to be given the opportunity to avenge her husband. Together with her bodyguard, she sets off to no man's land. June is dropped off the bus, and Serena points a gun at her. However, she shoots her bodyguard. She realizes that she can't just get out of Wheeler Manor, so this is her only chance to escape. Suddenly, she goes into labor. June wanted to abandon her, but realized that if she did so, she would be condemning Serena and her baby to death. So she helps with the labor. June still hates Serena, but realizes that she's really just a victim of the system that the commanders of Gilead have created. Soon the women are back in Canada and they're off to the hospital. Except that when Luke finds out that his wife is fine, he sicks Serena on immigration service. The woman is separated from her child and sent to jail. A short time later, the Wheelers, through their connections, take the baby for themselves. Serena can do nothing about it and asks June for advice. The main character says that she is not her friend, but advises her to act as she did when she was a handmaid. Demonstrate her submissiveness to everyone, and actually plan an escape day by day. Serena apologizes to the Wheelers, and they allow her to live with them, since the baby cries endlessly and needs breast milk. Meanwhile, the fertility center that Serena wanted to run opens, but now the Wheelers are running it. Serena asks Ryan to let her show up with the baby at the opening of the center. That way, people will get even more into the culture of Gilead. The man agrees, and the next day, Serena welcomes the guests. However, as soon as she gets the chance, she runs away from the building, catches a car, and leaves for an unknown destination. A young woman named Esther still can't cope with being a handmaid. Janine initially convinces her that she will be worse off if she doesn't accept it. However, when she is about to be assigned to Commander Putnam's family, a man stays in the room with her and rapes her. Esther returns to the Red Center, and unable to stand it all, she puts poison in the candy. This causes her and Janine to end up in intensive care. Aunt Lydia decides to bring Janine's daughter, in the hope that next to the girl she will come out of the coma, and, oh miracle, it happens. And soon, Esther comes back to normal too. At first, Gilead wants to cut out her uterus for her crime, but when they find out that she is pregnant, they forgive her. Aunt Lydia doesn't understand how this could have happened, as Esther still hasn't been assigned to the Putnam household. Upon learning of the rape, the old woman goes to Lawrence and informs him of it. At first, the commander was reluctant to do anything about it, but then realized that it would help his plans, as Commander Putnam was against his ideas to improve Gilead's image. Putnam is accused of rape and is immediately executed. Putnam's wife, named Naomi, remains a widow. Lawrence wants to solve both his problem of not having a wife and to make amends to Naomi by taking her as his wife. That way, he will no longer be questioned for not following the principles of Gilead, and Naomi will not be stripped of her status. Soon Aunt Lydia decides to take advantage of the situation and send her favorite Janine to the Lawrence family. However, due to recent events, she expresses everything to Naomi, because of which Janine is muzzled and taken to an unknown destination. Canadian citizens are beginning to take a negative view of the American refugees who have escaped from Gilead. Each day, the demonstrations grow louder and louder. Just at this time, Lawrence contacts June and tells her about his idea, which he has been planning for years. Actually, the old man has long wanted to find a way to save humanity, as he saw that the birth rate is getting lower and lower. The current way of life of people did not allow to solve this problem, and anything to change is not so easy. That's why Gilead was created. But without religious fanatics, it was impossible to do so. Lawrence realized that this was only the first step. Based on this tyrannical system, a country would later emerge and the rest would follow. Now that the first step was complete, Lawrence was going to build what he called New Bethlehem. It's roughly speaking a country within a country. It's a completely different approach, where there will be no executions and no enforcement. This city will be home to refugees who choose to return to Gilead from Canada. Lawrence promises that he will personally oversee the enforcement of the rules. He suggests that June move there with Luke and the baby. He even allows her to see Hannah occasionally. If June agrees, the other refugees will follow her. Lawrence also says that Nick and his wife, who turns out to be pregnant, will move to New Bethlehem. June hesitates at first, but eventually refuses the commander. One day, the main characters receive an envelope from Gilead containing a disc with a video. On it, they see Hannah at a school for future wives. June gives it to Mark in the hope that he will be able to find the school where the girls are kept. Surprisingly, he succeeds, and the United States government decides to launch a military operation. Just in this area, Gilead lacks radars, and they are going to send their planes with special forces, which will have to kidnap the girls from the school. However, it turns out to be a trap. Gilead set it all up on purpose, so that the United States would attack their country, and to the public America would turn out to be the aggressor who were dishonestly going to steal the children. All the planes get blown up by air defense systems. Soon there is a service for the dead pilots, and June is there. Suddenly a gunman shows up and tries to kill her but misses. Nick finds out about this and agrees to cooperate with the United States government in exchange for June's protection. Sometime later, June is hit by a car in broad daylight, and someone tries to kill the woman. But then Luke shows up and beats up the driver. Nick decides that it was Lawrence who ordered June's elimination. So freaking out, he bursts into the commander's office, beats him up, and blames him for everything. The other officers guess about his connection with June and send him to jail. Meanwhile, the driver who attacked June dies after being beaten by Luke. That means Luke could go to jail. The main characters realize that it is not safe for them to stay in Canada, since at any moment people can break in and avenge the murder of a citizen of their country. A couple with a child decides to flee, and Special Agent Mark tells them that the only way to leave the country without attracting attention is to get on a train to the West Coast, and there sit on a ship sailing to Hawaii. Mark gives them tickets, but arriving at the train station, the main characters realize that Luke is already looking for the police. The man realizes that if they do not find him, the train will not go anywhere. Therefore, he tricks his wife into getting on the train, and himself surrenders to the authorities. A distraught June tries to find a seat in the wagon and sees Serena with a child, who has also decided to flee Canada. This is the end of the 5th season. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the like button. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.